Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. It is my honor and privilege to have my next guest to talk about the NBA. We used to work together at ESPN on NBA Shoot-Around. That's what it was called then. Obviously, he's moved on to bigger and greener pastures, TNT, the NBA, the whole nine, calling games all over the place, being the astute expert basketball analyst that he is. He's my buddy, the one and only Greg Anthony. What's up, big time? How you doing, man? How's everything?
Stephen A., I'm doing good, brother. No complaints, man. Just enjoying the start of the season.
I feel you on that, man. It's always great to talk to you. First things first. I mean, when you heard, before we get to news on the court, let's talk about inside the NBA because those are your compadres, Shaquille O'Neal, Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, Ernie Johnson. We heard the news months ago that, they weren't going to be, they lost the NBA deal and this would be their last year. Now we've learned they're going to be carried by ESPN, but still being produced in Atlanta by TNT. It's a big, big deal. I love it. I'm happy for us as basketball fans. I'm happy for the public. I'm happy for them. How did you feel when you heard the news?
Well, I was excited because, Stephen, that's probably the most iconic sports show in terms of a pregame show that we have in America. And it doesn't matter the sport. I mean, football's king, obviously, but there is no show that really resonates more with the fans of sports and more entertaining than what they do on the inside the NBA show. So the fact that it's going to survive, I think, is awesome. The fact that they also get to basically keep everybody employed that's involved with the show in Atlanta, because I know for Ernie that was a big deal.
Right.
I think that's also incredible. And listen, you don't have to be a huge basketball fan to be a fan of that show. The chemistry those guys have, the entertainment value you get from that. I have a lot of friends who aren't necessarily basketball fans, but they're fans of that show. So the fact that that's going to continue on, I think is an awesome feat for them, and I think the fans are going to be the biggest beneficiaries.
And Greg, listen, man, I had people asking Stephen A., what about you? Whatever. I'm like, I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be all right. Don't worry about me. But I know this. But I know this much for somebody like me who used to do shoot around along with you. We had Kevin Frazier and then the late John Saunders, God rest his soul. We had Bill Laimbeer and then Tim Legler. I don't know of any basketball fan, any basketball pundit who could have a problem with this. We know that's the A team, and that's just a chemistry you don't mess with.
No, I think you hit it right on the head. Listen, you obviously have a huge vehicle with which and platform with which to state your case and offer your opinions on a variety of subjects. But that unto itself is a unique, iconic show, and what they've established over all these many years. I am glad. Listen, you know how much I love you and appreciate what you do for the sports world in general. But that niche that they've created, I'm glad to hear that they're going to keep it unique. Because, listen, even as talented as you are, it would be really difficult for anybody to kind of ingratiate themselves within what they do. So, let that be its own independent entity. I think ESPN is going to benefit. I think the NBA is going to benefit. And the fans as a whole are going to benefit with the fact that show is in essence going to stay the same. They're not going to tweak it or change it. That's the beauty of it. And I'm going to wish those guys the best because all those guys. There's not a better, closer group of guys. Like their chemistry, their humility, and the fact that they can laugh at themselves, man. Like even for me, like I might miss the game, but I'll still watch their show. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I got young kids, so I can't always watch every game, but I'm going to be able to tune in and check those guys off. There's never been a time they've been on air that I haven't found myself crying from laughter. And so I'm excited.
GA, listen, man, if you're asking about me, hell, I benefit by not being on the show. Could you imagine me being subjected to Charles Barkley and then Shaq and the Fool? I mean, did you see what Shaq and the Fool did to me last year? I mean, in Vegas, it was hilarious. But look,
and man, that would be weekly. They would get you every week. And listen, you got enough time. Shit, let somebody else have a damn job and do something else. You're going to be all right.
I am all right. Trust me on that. Let's get to the basketball court right now, because I got to tell you, the Boston Celtics are the reigning, defending NBA champions. But the story of the season thus far, particularly in the Eastern Conference, has been the Cleveland Cavaliers. I can't deny it. I mean, they won their first 15 games. When they lost the other night to Boston, I mean, they came back from a huge deficit, was in a position to win the game, but it didn't work out. What the hell has made Cleveland so much better this year than they were last year with the same roster, essentially, albeit a different head coach?
Well, I think Kenny Atkinson has tweaked a few things in terms of what they do. Listen, this is very similar. I'll take you back to the beginning of the Golden State Warriors dynasty.
Okay.
You know, when Mark Jackson was there, and Mark had done a good job. Mm-hmm. They got to the second round, lost in 6 to San Antonio, and they decided to go in a different direction. And it wasn't that Mark wasn't a good coach or a great coach for that matter. It's just that sometimes you need a different set of eyes that can see something that you may not be able to see from the inside. And so I just think Kenny's made some subtle changes in how they approach offensively. But I also think the biggest adjustment has been the fact that their players have all gotten better. You know, and then Donovan's even gotten better. Like, even though his numbers aren't as good, he's a better player because he's able to trust his teammates more. You know, Evan Mobley's gotten a little bit better. Darius Garland, he's gotten better. Jared Allen's gotten better. Their bench has been terrific. And, you know, one of the things that's happened to the NBA is that because of the three-point shot, it's created a dynamic now where you just can't physically overwhelm teams. And I'll take you back to, like, when I was in college. Like, one of the advantages, basketball is a game of possessions. That's what it all comes down to, right? And when we were in school, we could dominate the backboard and we could turn you over. So we could create an extra 15, 18 possessions a game because of our physical gifts, right? When I was with the Knicks, we could shoot 39% from the field and win by 20 because we could out-rebound you by 20. We could force 8 more turnovers against you. So we would create all those extra possessions. But now with the advent of three-point shooting and the fact that now guys can play, the court's so much bigger, it's harder to impose your will physically. And that's brought about more skill in the game. And so that's one reason why they've been so good and one reason why Boston's been so dominant as well. And while Cleveland is the story, I would also say Golden State's the story here in the Western Conference.
Right.
What they've done. You know, nobody saw them potentially being at this stage, maybe having the best record in the Western Conference, but those two teams in a lot of ways, they mirror each other in that regard, in that they win the possession game and they have that tremendous threat of the three-point shot. Plus with Cleveland, they do have, with that two-headed monster down low, the ability to own the paint. And Mobley's gotten better. And the last thing I'll say about those guys, they're the team, much like Boston, every guy on their roster loves their role. They don't have anybody that's doing something that they wish they weren't or wishing they could do something else. They're all comfortable. Evan Mobley's not a first option. He's comfortable in what he's doing. Darius Garland's not a first option. He's comfortable with his role. Like, all their guys are comfortable. And one thing, and you play sports, you know this. I always tell people, you never want to ask an athlete to do something they're not comfortable doing. You know, that's a recipe for disaster. Right now, they've got a bunch of guys that what they're asked to do on a nightly basis, they are in love with.
Well, I got to tell you, I would have been more in love with Golden State if I didn't sit at home and watch the game from start to finish and then be down by 40 in the first half against Cleveland. I know they got the record. Yeah. I know they're number one seed, but damn, I mean, that was a beat down that particular night. And in the case of Cleveland, what I've noticed is that Atkinson has put the ball more in Mobley's hands. So Mobley's averaging about 18 a game, more than he ever has in his career. He's shooting nearly 13 shots a game, and he's being allowed to make decisions, which is taking some of the on-ball pressure off of a Donovan Mitchell and a Darius Garland, even though that's your backcourt to a lesser degree. My question to you would be this, based on what you just broke down, in terms of the athleticism, because of the shot, the three-point shot that has been implemented into the game, and how that's sort of changed the game to some degree. And they're not asking anybody in Boston or Cleveland or to do something they don't want to do. How am I to feel about my New York Knicks with Karl Anthony Towns at the 5, essentially with Mitchell Robinson being out? I know he's been playing well, but how am I to feel about the Knicks based on what we've seen thus far? They're 9-6, third in the Eastern Conference, but still something seems to be missing compared to what we saw last year in the postseason.
Oh, listen, I'd feel great as a Knicks fan right now because the chemistry is being developed. And they're still able to win games without a whole roster. Because even when Mitchell Robinson comes back, you know, he's not going to play 40 minutes a night. He's going to take up another 24 minutes for you. So you're still going to have, much like you see with Anthony Davis with the Lakers, Anthony Davis has embraced playing the five. And that's what you see Karl Anthony Towns doing, embracing that position. You know, they're not having that old school mindset where, listen, at the five, you're not banging anymore, right? Your bigs got to play in space today. And so if I'm the Knicks, I love the fact that you got two guys that can comfortably create a situation where the defense has to help. Like nobody's guarding Jalen Brunson or Karl Anthony Towns single-handedly. So I think they're going to be terrific. I love what OG is doing, Bridges, Josh Hart. Like the only concern in some of its injury is their depth. And we all know that Tom Thibodeau loves to run his main guys. He's going to play them heavy minutes. So there is the concern of injury and them wearing down a little bit. But I love where they are. And the other thing, too, keep in mind, like you got to really throw records out. The NBA is at a golden era. It's
okay.
Getting a lot like the NFL. It's parity, man. Like we only have probably two or three what I would say are bad teams, you know, where you don't have to play well to beat them. You know, when I played, you might have 6 or 7, maybe 8 of those. You don't have that anymore. And so because of that, you're going to lose more games in the regular season than most would. But that doesn't mean you can't get it done come postseason. That's the reason why we've had 6 consecutive different champions.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we have a 7th this year, that just because of the parity.
I have to transition to a team your son is playing on. That's the Orlando Magic. I tell your son, be encouraged. He's not getting much playing time. I'm only averaging about 9 minutes right now, but he'll be fine. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Keep working on your game like your daddy taught you. You'll be just fine. But you look at the Orlando Magic. They've won 7 of their last 8. It's all been without their best player, Paolo Banchero, who's a bad brother. This brother's going to be something special. I'm looking at Orlando right now, and GA, I walked into the season thinking Philly, New York, and Boston. Now I'm thinking Boston, Cleveland, Orlando, and New York. That's what I'm looking at right now. Why is Orlando, led by Jamal Mosley, second-year coach, doing a damn good job? What is it about them that makes them look so good right now?
Well, I think that first and foremost, they are head and shoulders above everybody else defensively. Like they have the best defensive backcourt in the league. They have the best, and people don't talk about Franz in this regard, but Franz Wagner is a hell of a defender. And then they've got great defense on that back line. Like right now, think about it. They went into LA and beat a red-hot Lakers team without 3 starters.
Wow.
They didn't have Paolo. You talked about him, and we know his brilliance, but they didn't have KCP last night. Wow. They didn't have Wendell Carter Jr. last night either. And they were still able to go there. And that was also the second of a back-to-back. So they're a really good team. And there's something else about the league today. Young players are not in awe of others. You know, they respect great players, but this Orlando team, they understand who they are, and no matter who they play, they say, look, if we do A, B, and C, if we execute our game plan, we're going to have a great chance of winning. And so you've seen this natural progression, and Jamal Mosley's the biggest reason why, as a coach, he's empowered his young players. They bought in. Each year they've gotten better. You know, they've grown and wins, I think, 12 games each of the last 2 seasons. So they went 22 to 34 to 47, 13 last. So I expect them to be about a 50-game win team, but they're going to be hard to beat because they're starting to get comfortable winning. They're starting to get comfortable playing against great teams. And so I'm really looking forward to them, one, getting healthy, and then seeing how they stack up against Boston, against Cleveland, who, if you remember, they took Cleveland to 7 last year.
Yes, they did.
In that first round. So they're for real, and they're going to be there. And the other thing that's scary about them is that their 2 best players, their best basketball is in front of them. Like they're still. You saw it last night with Franz. He just was the Eastern Conference Player of the Week last week. He's going to probably be an All-Star this year. If Paolo gets back in time, he'll be a 2-time All-Star if he's able to, get enough games in. But they're legit, man. They're a great young team. They got depth. They're long. They're athletic. The shooting's still a work in progress for them, but it's getting better once they get healthy, and they're legit, man. It's going to be fun to watch them on this journey here moving forward.
Los Angeles Lakers was the team they beat last night.
Mm.
I guess the question would be, first of all, I got Anthony Davis as my leading candidate for MVP right now.
I'm with you.
I think
I'm
he's
right
been an
there with you.
absolute monster. He deserves credit where credit is due. He's finally embracing the role that LeBron and the Lakers have wanted him to embrace. I can't throw shade on J.J. Redick. I think that he's doing a damn good job as a rookie head coach, certainly paying a lot more attention to detail, is very, very passionate, holding cats like D'Angelo Russell accountable, which I think is important. Connect, I was a real big-time fan of them drafting him number 17. I watched him in the NCAA tournament last year for Tennessee. I believe LeBron has as well, even though people are accusing him of lying or watching Connect. I don't want to hear that. Everybody saw Connect if you're watching the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
But what are we to make of the Lakers in light of how LeBron has looked, how Anthony Davis has looked, but still looking at and purviewing the landscape in the Western Conference? How are you viewing the Lakers right now?
I like where the Lakers are, and last night, listen, they laid an egg at the free throw line. I wanted to say something else, but I don't want to get in trouble for using some bad language. But
okay. Well, it's YouTube, so you ain't got to worry about it, but go ahead.
Yeah, they shit the bed last night. Look, they missed 4 or 6 free throws down the stretch. They make 2 of those, they win the game. And AD, as great as he's been, and he has been brilliant this year.
Missed 2.
He missed those last 2. He missed 3 of his last 4. So that's why they lost that game. But they are right where they want to be. And part of why they're there is because if you look at the landscape of the West, OKC's dealing with all the injuries. They just got Hartenstein back. They've still been good. Obviously, they're 12-4. But they're still a young team. Dallas, you think about Dallas and Minnesota, 2 teams that played in the conference finals a year ago.
Yep.
They're both struggling this year because of the weight of the expectations. And in Minnesota's case, I just don't think they're quite as good. They're not as deep as they were a season ago. And that's why if you look at the Lakers, you know how LeBron thinks.
Right.
He's not looking at Golden State or OKC feeling like, man, we can beat them. Now, they still might struggle if the matchup were Denver and Denver's healthy, but Denver's roster doesn't scare you either. And so if I'm a Laker fan, I feel like they got a great chance. I could literally see them being a top 4 team in that Western Conference. And the team that we talked about Orlando, Stephen A., don't sleep on Houston.
I was getting there.
They're gonna win a
I was getting there. When Ime Udoka, I was getting ready to go there. What the hell? They the 3rd seed. What the hell's going on with them?
Yeah, they're really good. They're a great defensive team. Remember, they were a 500 team a year ago.
Yeah.
And they've got, again, the thing about the league that you got to factor in is that young teams, their players have the most room to grow. Like, they don't have to go out and make wholesale moves to get better. They can just let the evolution of their talent grow. And so you look at, even though he got hurt, but Chet Holmgren, even SGA, his best basketball, he's still getting better. Jalen Williams, all these guys are getting better. Now, they did go out and address some issues because they were a horrible rebounding team. So they go get Hartenstein, and then they bring in a dog in Alex Caruso on the perimeter for his defense. Mm-hmm. So they're going to be there, but they're still a young team. And so in the playoffs, you could see why a team like Dallas could beat them because all you got to do is steal a game in the postseason. Mm-hmm. You can get blown out 3 times in the postseason and still win a series.
That's right.
So like with veteran teams, they're not going to put a lot of weight. In fact, you'd rather get blown out. It's the 50-50 games. You go look at that Dallas OK series. It was the close games. That's what Dallas won. They won the close games. And that's why a team like the Lakers, now that they've got this newfound shooting with Connect, and think about it, the Lakers, Reeves hasn't been very good. D'Angelo Russell's been benched.
Yeah.
And yet they're still playing well. They don't have a backup center in essence right now. But you talked about J.J. Redick. He's done a hell of a job. And I just think, again, because of the parity, there are just so many good teams, and it's going to be hard to string together these long win streaks for teams right now. And I think the Lakers are going to be there.
Let me try to peel some quick answers from you. You sound like you talked about Minnesota not being a better team. Are you saying that do you feel the same way about the Knicks? Do you think the Knicks are a better team with Karl-Anthony Towns since you think Minnesota is not a better team without him?
Yeah, I do. And I don't think that Minnesota's not better because they lost Karl-Anthony Towns. They don't have as much depth as they had last year. And I think with the Knicks, it's the difference. Remember, the Knicks aren't whole yet. They still, they don't have everything in place. But the core of their team, they're fine. The Knicks are trending upwards. They've won 4 in a row. Mm-hmm. They're a really good offensive team. I can make the argument because Porzingis is out. that they got the best starting five in basketball because they got 5 guys that can all make plays. And so the Knicks are going to be fine, man. I'm telling you, we got a long way to go with this season, but man, this postseason, because of the parity, and it's going to be some really good teams that don't make it.
Right.
You know, we're not even. You talk about think about Memphis.
Yeah.
Don't sleep on Memphis.
I don't know yet. I don't know yet. It's like watching Ja Morant. I know what this brother can do when he's healthy and he's on the basketball court. And I'm a huge fan of a guy like a Marcus Smart. But obviously, they made their trade, they made their moves, their changes, and what have you. And I'm wondering about how Memphis is going to look. And then I bring this up about Boston, the reigning defending champions. Is there real parity, GA? Or is it just look that, or does it just look that way because Porzingis is not healthy yet?
No, I think there is real parity.
Okay.
I do think the Boston's the best. I still think, even though Cleveland's had to start, I do think Boston healthy is the best team. But I don't think that they're over. That they're not. Last year, I thought they were head and shoulders better than everybody else, and it proved to be that way with how they played in the postseason. This year, I still think they're the better team. But everybody now, once you're the top dog, everybody then starts figuring out how they got to beat you. And so they start building out the roster accordingly. And so that's why I think now, while Boston is the best team, there are a lot of teams that nobody fears them, like of the elite teams. You know, New York won't fear them. I don't think Cleveland, even after that loss, the way they came back in the game and the fact Darius Garland was 3 of 21, they're going to feel like they've gotten closer. Orlando's going to feel like they've gotten closer. So, and it's going to be similar in the East, man. We've never had this much depth in the NBA since we've gone to 30 teams, bro.
Wow.
We haven't. We've never had this much. Think about who's at the bottom of the East right now.
That's fair.
Philly is 2-12. Milwaukee 6-9. You know, those are 2 great young talent, great team, not young, but great team. Same thing in the East, in the West, I should say.
You're a savant in that regard because that's exactly where I was going. Number one, what the hell do you make of what on earth is going on in Philadelphia? Not only is Embiid hurt, not only is Paul George hurt, but they having team meetings, player-only meetings, and then diming out to the media how Tyrese Maxey called out Joel Embiid for tardiness and being late and hurting the team and what have you. This is not good. What are your thoughts about that in Philly?
Well, I give Tyrese, who I know pretty well, Maxey, a lot of credit for being willing to be a leader. But I think that's part of the problem. He shouldn't be the leader. And if what we're hearing is true, then that also means that Embiid hasn't been a pro. Because there's just no excuse for you being late to everything and not feeling like you're completely invested. And I'll tell you what, quite honestly, I put this on the organization. Because if you've allowed this stuff to manifest, then that's on you. Shame on you that you've allowed this to happen, because that's the one thing I learned playing with some truly great players. Pat, like generally your best players are your hardest workers. Like if you go to Boston, I guarantee you they will all tell you that Tatum and Brown are the hardest workers. If you go to OKC or Golden State, I guarantee you they will tell you that Steph Curry and SGA are the hardest workers. And that's really the formula for success if you want to have a championship level team. If you don't think Jokic is the hardest worker in Denver, like your great players set the tone by leading by example. You don't have to have a big voice, but you lead by example. And the fact that we're hearing that and we haven't really gotten any pushback, I think their season is probably, I don't see that they will, I don't think they even will make the play-in. I'm going to be honest with you. And it's early in the season.
That way now. It's looking that way now.
But I'm not feeling good. And Paul George doesn't look right, man. These 2 injuries he's had, it looks like his body is starting to fail him, you know, because those are injuries that your body wouldn't normally allow to happen if you're sharp and you're right. And I just think he's had a lot of miles. There's a reason why the Clippers didn't want to give him those extra years. And Philly ran out there and did it. And I just don't know if we're going to see Paul get back to that level. I'm pulling for him because I love the guy. I want to see him get there, but I'm worried about the Sixers.
I love him too. I'm worried about his health. I'm definitely worried about the Sixers. Embiid owned what Tyrese Maxey said in terms of his accuracy. He said, I got to do better. Make no mistake about that. And obviously, the only thing that I don't want to hear about the Clippers is, damn it, you didn't pay Paul George. What the hell you doing paying Kawhi Leonard either? He just is hurt, if not more so. So don't get me started with that. What's going on with your boy Doc Rivers in Milwaukee? They've won 2 straight, but they're 3 games under 500. They obviously started out slow. I don't know how much faith I'm going to have in Milwaukee right now.
Well, I will say this, Stephen, and I've said this on the air. Listen, when your two best players are playing as well as they are when they're healthy and you don't win games, that means your team ain't that good. That means the rest of your roster isn't very good. Now, they don't have Middleton. So that obviously makes a huge difference because if Middleton can get back to what we have seen from him, and I don't know if he can, let's be real, he's coming off 2 ankle surgeries. But if he can get back to even just being a legit third option, now they get interesting. Now they can get interesting because I feel like Dame and Giannis's chemistry is really finally where we would have liked it to be. Because you remember, Dame talked about it. He didn't, his first time in his career, he didn't really train in the offseason because he was afraid of getting hurt because he knew he was getting traded. Right. And so now he looks like he normally looks. Giannis, we talk about Anthony Davis. If Milwaukee had a better record, Giannis would be the MVP favorite right now. Yeah. I mean, he just been off the charts, how good he's been. So I feel like they're trending in the right direction. And again, because of the parity, you talk about they're 6-9. Bruh, they ain't but 3 games out of the 4th spot. So they're fine. They're fine. I'm not worried about it. I don't see them as a championship team because I don't think they have enough athletes and when I say basketball players, on a great team, your guys got to be great at what you ask them to do. And I just don't know if their supporting cast can be great at all those other things anymore. You know what I mean? Brooke Lopez has gotten old. Connaughton slowed down. The young guys aren't quite ready.
Let me stop you right there then. Quick question, put you on the spot. What's the chances you think that Giannis asks out of Milwaukee?
I don't see it this year.
After the season.
After the season, I could see it. Listen, for them, they may have to make a move because otherwise you're going to waste his ability. If they get knocked out in the first round this year and he's brilliant, they don't have a roster with a lot of flexibility. They don't have a lot of young guys that others are going to be interested in. So it's going to be really hard for them to make moves to bolster that roster, like what we saw the Knicks just do, right? You saw the move to get Karl Anthony Towns.
That's right.
They had flexibility to make moves. I don't think Milwaukee's flexibility is there, and I think that you might see a scenario where you'd have to move him because you're not going to be able to get off Dame, and they just don't have enough. Now, having said that, they could still get hot and come by the time we get there and find themselves in the conference finals because those two guys are playing at a high level. And if we see Middleton come back and play at a high level, then it's a different ballgame.
2 more questions before I let you get on out of here. 1, who's your rookie of the year?
Ooh, man.
Thus far.
I'm going to tell you right now, I don't have one. I don't think nobody's really separated. I think we've seen a lot of young guys have flashes. Reese Share has had some good games. Dalton Connect's had as good a stretch as anybody.
That's who I was going to go with.
He came in the last night, averaging in the last 5 games. He's almost 25 a game.
That's who I was going with.
So he's up there. But that's my point, though. Nobody's differentiated themselves. No one set themselves apart. So I really don't have a rookie of the year right now. I didn't think it was a great draft to begin with. And I think that is yet to be determined. Like we could talk MVP, right? You already have a sense of that, like I do. I don't have a sense on the rookie of the year, and the fact that you could say Dalton, I think that speaks volumes to the fact that nobody else is really elevated yet at this stage.
Last question, relatively delicate one. We saw Rich Kleiman a month ago tweet out about the negativity of the media and how. He wishes things were better and sports are supposed to bring us together. We saw yesterday, we learned that LeBron James retweeted that tweet from a month ago and basically announced to the world that he was stepping away from social media for a little while. My attitude is this. First of all, I don't want to hear about the national media being thrown under the bus when y'all are part of it too. Acting like they ain't a part of it when you got podcasts and all this other place. No, you in it, you in the muck and mire with the rest of us. That's number 1. Number 2, and I want to be very respectful when I say this, as a father, a former NBA player who's a father and your son is now playing in the NBA, when I saw that from LeBron James, I'm like, LeBron James approaching age 40 is still playing like a top 5 player on the planet. So ain't nobody talking about negativity towards him. If they're doing so, they're talking about Bronny. And that's what LeBron must have been alluding to. To that, you say what?
I would have to agree. Listen, and you know this. We have never had an athlete as accomplished as LeBron James catch as much heat and vitriol and hate. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. At
no,
times.
we've never seen anybody. And again, I'm not saying you have to like him, but you got to respect what he's done. But
Absolutely.
even at this stage of his career, there's nobody that gets more vitriol or hate. And the fact that he's comfortable with that tells me the fact that he's uncomfortable is because of his son. And I think that his son hasn't necessarily been able to handle the hype, the expectations, and the negativity. And that therefore it has really made him look at it. And I'm speaking of LeBron in a different way, right? All the great players, they can handle criticism. KD, all these guys, they don't get caught up that. Listen, the reality though is now everybody's got an opinion, right? We used to say opinions are like assholes, right? Everybody got one. The difference was though, you didn't hear everybody's opinion before, right? No, most people didn't have the opportunity to respond to Stephen A. Smith directly and actually have you hear what was said. And it's not going to affect you, but I guarantee you, as a father, if that same type of rhetoric or vitriol was directed at your child, it would affect you differently.
Right.
There's no question about it. Listen, LeBron has dealt with more crap over the just since he's been in LA. And he's never shied away from it. He's always had courage. He's always spoke his mind, whether you agree with him or not.
Right.
He's never been one to shy away. Very much like you in that regard, right?
Right.
But it's different when it now becomes one of your children, because you're vulnerable for them, man. You want to protect your kids.
Can I throw this caveat out to close this out? Something needs to be added to that, especially when it's of your doing. Because of what he said about Bronny before he got to the NBA. I want to play with my son. My son is better than some of these NBA players in the league right now.
Yeah.
These are things he said. So I think it's one element which you're absolutely on point about his son. But it's another thing when you instigated it, arguably, because of the things you were saying about your son in comparison to others, and you put your son unintentionally, he certainly didn't mean to hurt his son in any way, but that's the unintentional consequence of his actions.
I think you hit it on the head, because the reality is you assume that your child can handle it the way you can. And the reality is I think it's hit him that Bronny's struggling with it. He's struggling with the expectations, and I've said this about LeBron. Listen, there's been in my lifetime, there's been 3 athletes now that have been this hyped and actually have exceeded the expectations. That was Tiger Woods, LeBron James, and now Caitlin Clark. Those are the 3, because Michael didn't come in with that kind of hype. Michael was the 3rd pick. Kobe didn't come in with that kind of hype. He's a 13th pick. Didn't really even play that much as first. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
LeBron and Tiger came in. They were superstars before they had ever even started to perform at the highest level. And not only did they perform, they exceeded the expectations, much like we're seeing with Caitlin Clark, right? And so, but most athletes are given a period of grace. And the problem for Bronny is, on his own level, there was so much hype and expectation around him, and the fact that it just hasn't materialized, even to the point where he's even performing at a high level in the G League yet. And I think that has weighed on him somewhat, because you can only imagine the level of hatred and nastiness that somebody you don't know can spew about your son and have somebody else pick up on it. And I think that can, and it's not just LeBron, it's his wife, it's his other kids, because they got to deal with that too. Like, they probably are comfortable with all that hate going at LeBron, because that's all they've ever known.
Par for the course.
So that I agree with you there, brother.
My man, it's always good to talk to you. Always good seeing you. I'll be watching and listening to you call the game tonight. Seeing you on TV tonight, actually. Appreciate you so much, man. Hope you well. Wonderful, happy holidays to you and yours, my man. All the best.
You too, man. Be safe, man. God bless, brother.
The one and only Greg Anthony, NBA TV, TNT, basketball analyst extraordinaire. Yes, I'm willing to openly admit, hell, that man has forgotten more basketball than I ever know. He used to give me lessons on the sport of basketball all the time. I ain't ashamed to tell you.